Hello, and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we'll travel back in time to the 19th Academy Awards, which awarded the films of 1946. Clarence Brown returned to the Oscars with a family film about a boy and his deer called The Yearling. The film was a hit with audiences and went on to earn 7 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director, and a pair of nominations for stars Gregory Peck and Jane Wyman. But it was The Best Years of Our Lives that was the star of Oscar night, winning 7 Oscars, including Best Picture. So why did The Yearling come up short? We'll explore all this and more as we discuss how the Oscar almost went to The Yearling. Hello and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I'm your host Kevin Jacobson, and today we're talking about The Yearling. So I think this will be a very interesting discussion for a few reasons, and my guest today is a returning guest who you first heard talking with me about How the West Was Won and the films of 1963. She then joined me for an episode of On Second Thought about Juno. And then a few months ago, talking about the Oscar nominations of this past year. From Next Best Picture, please welcome back to the show, Casey Lee Clark.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for coming back. And I want to also just thank you for being basically my Civil War correspondent. Because it seems like you are randomly always the guest on years where we're talking about a film set during the 1800s. So...
You know what? You guys needed help. I'm on my way.
That's you. We were in a crisis and you really helped us. So, shall we get into The Yearling?
Yeah, I guess so.
How are you doing, by the way? Are we holding up?
I'm all right, all things considered.
Yes. It's just a really weird time right now in the world, and so let's just go all the way back to 1946, and then this is also a film that's taking place in the 1800s, so we're just going further and further back.
Oh, way back.
Yes. So, The Yearling is a family coming-of-age drama about a family living on a farm in Florida shortly after the Civil War. And we have Penny Baxter, who was a former Confederate soldier, and his wife, Ora. She's sort of become emotionally distant after losing most of her children. And the one boy who has survived, Jody, is a very innocent young boy who really bonds with his father as they sort of go out hunting and go on trips and all of that, while having a bit of a strained relationship with his mother because of how cold she can be towards him. And eventually Jody finds an orphan deer and bonds with it, eventually names it Flag. But the deer causes some trouble with the family crops, which causes Jody's parents to be uneasy about the deer's presence, especially when it starts to eat basically everything they have, and tensions ensue. And the film was directed by Clarence Brown and written by Paul Osborne, based on the novel of the same name by Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings. And it stars Gregory Peck as Penny Baxter, Jane Wyman as Ora, and Charles Jarman Jr. as Jody. And The Yearling made $5.2 million at the box office, which was a pretty solid total in that time period. And it was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, winning 2. But not Best Picture. So yes, Casey, here we are again talking about a film set in the 1800s about a pioneer family. So what do we think? What's your take on The Yearling?
It's a movie.
It sure is.
Looks great.
Sure.
That's my nice my nice take.
Yes, beautiful setting. Cinematography, color, beautiful stuff. Yes.
I think the one thing that I'll give it is that it's very different from both all the Best Picture nominees as well as just a lot of the other films of this year. It was a big film noir era, plus living in that post-war time in America. You got a lot of similar films, so I think this one at least stood out both visually and with its subject matter. So
Hmm.
at least I'll give it that, as like it felt a little different from everything else I've been watching for this.
Yes, this is very true. This is very much a kind of the throwback of this group of films, where we have a lot of films, especially the Best Picture winner, talking about very contemporary issues. And this is just sort of a sweet little throwback, sort of a movie to make you feel good and also make you feel sad.
Yeah.
So, what do you think of these, the central performances here, first off?
Jane Wyman really won me over. I think that it's a very layered and complex performance that has a lot more to it than what you expect right when you introduced to her. I think that she's got a bit of an arc, and I think the emotional payoff at the end with her is earned. I would say that's like the highlight of the film for me as a whole.
Yeah, it probably will not surprise other people listening here that she was really the one element that I really connected to the most in this story, because I think this is a character that it's going beyond just the dumb father son antics and the sentimentality, and you really have this character who has been through a lot, and she's lost most of her kids. We literally see like a panning shot of all the dead children's gravestones.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of happy that that moment is placed early in the film, because it really contextualizes why she has become so cold and closed off, even from her only remaining son. And
Yeah.
that's an interesting relationship, I think. It's a very, very, very earnest and sweet movie, excessively so, I would say. And sometimes I like films that are sincere like this, because quite frankly, it's kind of a nice break sometimes from the very cynical, like postmodern stuff that I tend to watch in modern movies. And it's nice to sometimes just get back to the fundamental, earnest filmmaking sort of thing. But with this, I have to be honest and say that this movie just completely overdoes everything.
Oh, yeah. And I think a lot of that, no offense to him, has to do with the main kid.
Yep.
And I can't decide if some of it's the dialogue they give him or his acting.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's some lines in this where I was just like, I need to take a note of where it's like, I only have three friends. It's him and my dad and you. And I'm like, oh, dear God.
Yeah, it's awkward to say this just about a child actor, but he is.
He ends up getting work. It's fine. Like, it's not like some tragic child actor story. I looked him up. He's fine. He was fine.
This is true. He's just so unbearably hammy, I think.
Oh, God.
In such a kid performer kind of way.
Yeah, and there's like parts when he's like running around crying, and I'm like, you are not Anna Paquin in the piano. Calm down.
You tried it.
Yeah.
I just have to imagine that there were other actors, even from this time period, who could have gone more in depth, I guess, or just found other layers to this, because he feels very one note for most of the film.
Yeah, there's not really any subtlety to it. And there's like weird touches to it that I like couldn't quite figure out. Like his acrobatics. Do you notice in the bear hunting scene how much he jumps into that tree, and then in the fight scene later how he's just like leaping onto old men's backs? And I'm just like, what is happening?
It's a lot. Yeah.
It's a lot.
Also, just to touch on that, since you mentioned it, that sequence with the bear and the dogs, what did we think of that? Because that felt very real and graphic almost.
Yeah, I kept being like, how did they do? There's a lot of this movie where they have a thing at the end where this was like everything was
right
approved and in touch with the American Humane Association or something. But especially that scene, I was like, I don't know how they did this, because I kept waiting. I was like, when's it going to look like a guy in a bear suit?
Yeah.
And
I think there is one point where there's like a point of view shot of the bear looking down at the dogs. I think that was like the only time I was like, okay,
And they shot it kind of in a way where like you could tell they like shot scenes of a bear and then shot shots of dogs.
Right.
But then the ones when it's like fighting them, it's like the way that they're even still the way they're flinging those dogs around. I was like, I don't like this.
No, it's very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is
Especially like up until pretty recently, like animal laws on film sets were very like not there. And so
they were pretty lax, yeah.
yeah, so
Definitely.
I kept being like, oh, I don't like how they probably got these animals to be in this movie. I don't want to know.
And that is something that I also want to talk about with just the story itself and specifically the treatment of the deer.
Can we first talk about this? I don't care if this is a spoiler. You don't meet this deer until an hour in,
I
which is
know.
halfway through the movie.
I made a note of this too. It's
I was
interesting
like,
that it's advertised as like this is the story of a boy and his deer.
and it's not even until halfway through. Yeah, and I started realizing I was like, wait, how long have I been watching this? And it was like literally like a beat before they found him that I like paused and was like, how far into this? And it was exactly halfway. I was
Yeah.
like, you've got to be kidding me.
It's pretty unnecessary, just the amount of build up to that. There's just like these random scenes where they go to a general store and the boy is like interacting with this girl, and I'm just like, is this necessary? Like,
Yeah, and
what
then
are we doing here?
yeah, or like the neighbor people
Yes,
that
the
who have the kids that he's
foresters.
friends with.
Yes,
Yeah. What the dynamic of all those people there was, I have no idea.
yeah, and this really feels like a symptom of just trying to adapt a book and all of the dynamics in a book that people treasure that have all these different elements to it that just don't really translate very well to the cohesive film at all. None of that
Simultaneously felt
conflict
like it was
really works for
missing,
me.
yeah, it simultaneously felt like it was missing things and also way too long.
Yeah. It's over 2 hours, which
Yeah.
is kind of excessive for a film that is billed as something for families.
Yeah.
But that actually, your point about that the deer only shows up until like halfway through, I would say that's an interesting thing that we also find with another Best Picture nominee in this field with It's a Wonderful Life, where it takes quite a while to get to really like the hook of that film that
Which,
people
yeah.
remember, but done more
Yeah, and
effectively.
I have points about that, I
Okay.
think. And I
Okay.
think it's more of people's interpretation of what that film is than what I think, and now what it's being sold as prior to what I think its conceit was to
Yes.
begin with. But whereas
Yes.
this one, it's like, that is your movie.
Right. Gregory Peck. So, interesting case here because I think he's really solid, and I don't want to say that this is anything near what he does with Atticus Finch by any means,
No.
but it's very much the same type of role where he's playing this saintly father type who is bonding with his kid and also has to give them some hard life lessons. And he's solid. I like him very much, as I've noted on this show before, but I don't really see where the nomination comes from here. I don't know
Yeah,
about
no.
you.
Yeah, like Jane Wyman, I can get. I think there's an arc there. I think that there's a lot more depth and layered up performance. Him, I almost feel like he was miscast.
Yeah.
Like there's something about the way he speaks and how he looks that I never buy him in this environment.
Mm-hmm.
Like I almost needed someone a little more rugged.
He's too clean. He's too
He
pretty.
is like he was in our main movie that we talked about in '63 in How the West Was Won as like a
That's
more
right.
refined businessman
And that works
type.
for him. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas I think this, it like he always felt a little the way he spoke and the way he looked a little too out of place for me.
I think the accent work is a little wobbly.
There's a lot of accents in this that I'm like
Yeah, yeah.
stronger at other points and whatnot. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, we mentioned this a little bit last time with Gentleman's Agreement, but I think the Academy really did just love seeing him in these kinds of sturdy roles, and they just kept nominating him, even when the work wasn't really that showy. I mean, he
Yeah.
certainly has a very likable screen presence. He's like the ideal dad, and
Yeah.
you're comforted by him. You know, maybe that's just my own issues. But Yeah, but at the same time, I really just did not buy him as this farmer. It doesn't really work overall, sadly. Even though there are, those moments where he is teaching him those life lessons and he's going off on his stories, I think he does have that great paternal presence, at least.
Yeah.
I like the scene where he's sitting by the fire. Anyway, one thing I wanted to get to with the deer in specific, since that is presumably what the film is about. The initial scene where Jody is like moving the bushes around to see Flag, and he's like weirdly raising his eyebrows suggestively was kind of like unintentionally hilarious, but
there's a lot of unintentionally hilarious moments in this.
Yeah.
As you put on Twitter.
Goodbye, Oliver. Goodbye, Twink.
I died.
Oh my lord. Yes. But that initial scene where they're meeting, I guess you could say, I think it's effective in sort of just reflecting that childhood wonder sort of thing that you would have as a kid, just discovering something like an animal and just wanting to protect it. And the deer is so beautifully framed, like an angel, basically. It's a cute deer. I like the deer.
Cute deer.
Yeah. But I just am sort of unsettled ultimately, just sort of about the film's message in that, yes, the parents have their reservations about Jody keeping this deer as a pet at first, but they just go on letting him have it in their house and even sleeping in Jody's bed.
Yep.
It's probably pooping everywhere, making a mess. And then, when the deer is starting to actually eat all the crops on the farm, that's when the parents really are taking action, but it gets bigger and the deer is doing things that are very natural to what a deer does. Mm-hmm. And because this family was dumb enough to bring a deer into their home, that deer now has to be punished.
Yeah, apparently.
That's essentially what the situation here is. I just feel like the parents, but especially the father, should be just feeling a little more guilty about doing all of this to this helpless deer who didn't know any better and is essentially just being used as a lesson for Jody about growing up and having to experience hardship in his life.
Yeah.
So did you take any sort of similar issue with how things proceeded here?
Yeah, I feel like it felt like you saw it coming the second you start this movie. Like, I think that most animal movies kind of have that cliche ending, but I also felt like a lot of that second half is very repetitive. Mm-hmm. With like, okay, he ate a different crop. Oh, they're mad at him, but they're not going to like, and I get that the point is like, you have to see him do this constantly for it to be warranted of, okay, you have to put him down. But
yeah,
it still was just like, what's the point here?
And I'm sorry, but I truly think that there were other ways of handling this situation.
Yeah, like if you don't want him eating
lock
your
it in the
barn,
barn.
let him sleep in the house. Lock him in the barn.
Yeah.
Like or the second they make that giant fence and you see him out there, I'm like, he's gonna jump that fence.
Yeah. Or just let Jody feed him some different kinds of food, train him to eat a certain kind of food. I don't know. Just
yeah. And then of course the Gregory Peck character gets injured, and so then he's bedridden for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
And so I think there probably could have been things that he could have, I don't know, done better. It feels like an interesting choice to have him have that happen the rest of the film. It's like, okay.
Because then it forces Jody to be the man of the house,
yeah,
quote unquote, and take charge of everything. And I just feel like if they did that, just like, lock him in the barn, make different choices, basically, that is its own life lesson in a way of adapting to your surroundings and your situation, not just having no idea what to do with this wild animal and just
and
shooting it because you don't know how to deal with it properly, and leaving your only child traumatized
Oh God,
and
yeah.
having visions of this deer for years to come. It's
That
just
okay. Do we want to talk about the ending?
sure.
I think that there's an emotional payoff with the Jane Wyman character, and I think you could have just ended right there. And then instead, we have to have these. There's a lot of dissolves in this movie that are
Yeah.
very long and unnecessary. And then this one of him sleeping, seeing him running around with the deer, and I'm like, what? What's the point?
I feel like he will be thinking about this for the rest of his life, and he will have issues of some sort. I just
Probably.
wonder what the future for this kid is. Will he have trust issues? Like, who knows?
Probably.
It's an interesting note to end on because I do think, because like I said, I latched on to what Jane Wyman was doing and her arc, that would definitely have just been the fitting ending, to have it be that she hasn't been able to connect with her child for this entire film due to circumstances that aren't really his fault, although he is kind of annoying, so I don't
Yeah.
blame her. But getting to that point of how he's running away and she's so scared that her only other child has now left forever, possibly, and her coming back and feeling that sense of warmth again and being so grateful to have him in her life. That's a satisfying ending, because that is
Yeah.
another it's one of the biggest conflicts of the film, and just have it end nicely there. I don't know. Maybe it was a studio note.
Probably.
Remind them of the deer.
Yeah.
The cinematography, though, I do want to get back to, just because I think it is a highlight that is a positive that I want to talk about in,
Yeah.
within this
Especially for like this
discussion.
era, I think we were so used to a lot of like black and white, shadowy, interiored films that seeing this like green and brown landscape in color was like very effective.
Yeah, definitely. Gorgeous sunsets. I love all of that.
Hmm.
How well the camera captures just the vastness of the land. Certainly a very worthy winner of the cinematography category, and also the art direction, I think,
Yeah.
is very authentic feeling in their house, very humble, very economical. They have limited resources. I think on a visual level, very beautifully done for 1946, especially.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like a film that was not newer necessarily, maybe more like 50s, 60s era.
Yeah, yeah, feels a little bit ahead of its time in that one regard, at least.
Yeah.
Others, yeah, it feels very stuck almost. I read some review, I don't know where it was, but just that feels like what the kid actor Claude Jarvis Jr. is doing is like almost silent film acting,
Yeah.
where he's
It's
just so
very over
like
the top.
goofy and expressive and too much. Too much.
Yeah. And I was reading that apparently the director liked having a lot of options, so they would do like 20 takes.
Mm,
And I'm just intrigued at what some of those other takes were like. If this
yeah,
was like him
these
being
were the
like, all right, I
best.
need more, and then this is what we got. I don't know.
Well, and we can actually talk a little bit about, there's an interesting behind the scenes element here where this production actually began in 1941
Yeah.
with Victor Fleming and Spencer Tracy and Anne Revere playing the father and the mother. And they were on location, and there were all kinds of like bugs to deal with, and there was conflict behind the scenes, and all the actors quit. And then the war happened. And so it was delayed significantly, of course, and production began again in 1945, and here we have it. I would be curious to see a Spencer Tracy in that role, because I think maybe he could have done something with that.
Yeah. I'm wondering if they shot any of the some of those like exteriors without the actors in them, if they just kept that or
Oh
not,
yeah,
or
that's true.
all of the footage was from 1945. That would be interesting.
Yeah, yeah, but it's just something that I hadn't even realized before, just like the tumultuous production behind the scenes. And here comes Clarence Brown and Gregory Peck and Jane Wyman, this whole new cast, and like Claude Jarba Jr. was chosen from this group of like 19,000 young actors. And I read that a main factor in him being cast was his long hair. So that's a
Sometimes
reason.
that's all it takes, I guess.
Yeah. Sometimes your hair just looks right. And I also read that Gregory Peck was not really a fan of the finished product.
I mean, I don't blame him.
He said it was much too lushly done, and then he also said the boy cried too much.
Oh my God. Yeah, and plus then when you compare the actress who plays Scout in To Kill a Mockingbird with him
Oh my
later on,
God.
like it's
Yeah,
just night and day of what you can do with a child performance.
it really is. Yeah. Just a few other stray observations. Do you buy this marriage between Gregory
No,
Peck and Jane Wyman? Because I was not feeling the chemistry, to be honest.
no.
I don't know what he would see in her, and I don't know what she would see in him. Just
Yeah, the
saying.
only thing that I can pinpoint is like her kind of shutting everyone off after the deaths of her other three children,
Yeah.
and that kind of putting a wedge between them. But even still, yeah,
I I like them both individually as actors, but I don't think it necessarily worked as a pairing.
yeah,
But no, I think Jane Wyman is the MVP, and I honestly think, since we didn't get any questions about this, we could just talk about it now. I wonder if she would be campaign and supporting in a modern day.
yeah. It's hard to say. I feel like the idea was that the parents were the leads. I guess that the three of them were all the leads, and then obviously everyone else was supporting. I don't know, but yeah, I could see her being considered supporting now. It's on the line.
Yeah. To me, she just feels a little too sidelined overall,
Yeah.
just because she's not really a part of the big going out on the adventure parts. That I could sort of make a case for her being a worthy supporting person here. Maybe could have won.
Maybe.
Yeah, okay.
I'm fine with the winner. Let's just say that.
No, I am too. I'm just saying. So, any additional thoughts on the Yearling? I feel like there's just not a lot of like thematic elements that are worth even delving into, just because I don't think the film does a good enough job of doing that. But
No, not really. I mean, I hadn't heard of this film prior to looking into this Oscar year, so I don't think it's really one that's necessarily stood the test of time, even compared to other films like it. Like more people have heard of like Old Yeller.
yeah,
So
yep, that is the natural comparison. And it was interesting reading about just the response to it at the time, as far as there seemed to be a lot of connecting to it just on an emotional experience. And I think you can maybe understand why you can resonate with a film like this. It's just nowadays I really don't think it has held up.
yeah. Yeah, and
So
especially at that time, there's a balance of like wanting to show like the real aftermath of World War II, like in Best Years of Our Lives, or you want to just show some feel good of different time to think about something else.
yeah. And so in a best picture field, at least, that is primarily filled with films that don't really give you that sort of warm feeling, this is one that can resonate with a certain faction, I think, of an
Yeah.
academy. But let's get into those Oscars if you don't have anything else to discuss here. I'm
No,
pretty
I'm all
much
good.
tapped out. So
Yeah. Yeah.
the Yearling is just, I'll just say, to wrap up this segment, would I recommend it?
If
It's
you're
up
a
to you.
completist,
Right. If you are a completist and you just wanna have the context of us talking about it. I
yeah, and
mean,
if you like Jane Wyman,
yes. You Jane Wyman heads in the audience.
it's
I
no
think this is
it's
a good
no
one.
her sadly staring into a television set, but it's good.
Correct. Yes. And when we come back, we will be discussing why The Yearling lost Best Picture to The Best Years of Our Lives.
MGM's Children's Matinee presents the famous story of a boy named Jody, a baby deer, and a big, beautiful land, the Yearling. Come along with Jody on a thrilling hunt for a wild bear. Join in a brawling free-for-all. And discover a baby deer deep in the forest. A little pet all your own. A yearling who gets into all sorts of mischief.
That settles it. That deer has got to go.
Go! And don't you ever go back! Don't you ever!
And we're back. So now we'll be talking about why The Yearling lost Best Picture to The Best Years of Our Lives. The Yearling was nominated for 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director for Clarence Brown, Best Actor for Gregory Peck, Best Actress for Jane Wyman, Best Art Direction Color, Best Cinematography Color, and Best Film Editing. And it won for its art direction and cinematography. And I will just say here, I forgot to mention it on the 1947 episode, but from here on out, there's really not a lot of precursors to talk about, because in a lot of cases here, this is the first few ceremonies for a lot of these things. But worth mentioning that Gregory Peck won the Golden Globe for Best Actor. How about that? And The Best Years of Our Lives won the Golden Globe for Best Picture, and it won the New York Film Critics. And that was pretty much the extent of precursors in this time period. So not a lot to go on in that regard, but let's talk about why we think The Best Years of Our Lives was our Best Picture winner for this year. What are your thoughts?
I think that, like I kind of teased in the previous segment, I think that it was by far the first war film to kind of show the aftermath of the war and be more realistic of what being away for that long and coming back and trying to fit back into normal life is really like. And I think that people gravitated towards that. It feels like this great American epic in its scope and length. And I think that it both delved into topics that weren't as talked about then, but also having like a through line of family and romance and things like that, that I think it had a lot for people to gravitate towards, and it's very well made.
Yeah. And this is, I think, another situation where the Best Picture winner going into the night, even though we didn't have a lot of precursors, was pretty clearly going to be The Best Years of Our Lives. Not only is it relevant to the times, as you were sort of saying, living in 1946, it provided a new layer of showing how difficult it was, and still is for a lot of people, for those who served in a war, going through major difficulties, just readjusting to normal life again back home, and showing also how multifaceted that experience can be, because not every soldier goes through the same thing when they're trying to acclimate back into life at home. And you have one guy who turned to alcohol and can't really adjust to how much his kids have grown up, and another guy is coming home to a wife who he only knew for a brief time, and their relationship is very strained. And then you also have this other guy who lost both of his hands and has to operate in society again, to where simple things like holding a drink becomes a major task. And it's really fascinating to have this story that takes place after most stories about war would end, and it's basically saying, like, well, now what? And I think that it's just really a compelling human character drama that a lot of people connected to and were ready to see. And Frederick March, Harold Russell, and Dana Andrews are all fantastic. It's a great ensemble. Mm-hmm. It just has so many, it just ticks so many boxes of what the Oscars love, from the character drama, the ensemble of it all, to having something relevant to say. It was just the exact right film at the right time.
Yeah.
And you compare that to The Yearling and,
Yep.
just doesn't really hold up. But I will also note that this was a runner-up that I really tried to contemplate what was the runner-up to Best Years of Our Lives, because there wasn't a super clear indication as to what it might be. The reason I ultimately went with The Yearling is because it gets 7 nominations, including director, actor, and actress, and film editing. And I had just been doing research, and there were even polls and something from the Los Angeles Times even predicting that The Yearling would win Best Picture. And it was really set up as this race between, could be the best, it's probably going to be the best years of our lives, but watch out for The Yearling. So that's the reason I went with it, for those who wanted to know about that. So yeah, I again think that this is a pretty open and shut case, but we can get to some questions about both of these films if you're ready for them.
Yeah, of course.
We have quite a few. Well, this is from Catherine Short, who said, Aura Baxter is unusual for a mother in a 1940s film in that she is emotionally cold mother but is still sympathetic. Could you discuss how the screenplay and Jane Wyman's fantastic performance make Aura such a complex, nuanced character?
I mean, I think we talked about it a little before, but I think that having that reveal at the beginning that, you know, she's lost 3 of her children and that's kind of put this wall up for her, I think that allows you to understand that character more and forgive some of her decisions and how she treats her family, and you kind of feel a lot more sympathetic towards her. And then I think that ending for her is really satisfying, you know, when they don't see that she's home yet and she sees them in the doorway and she's crying, and it's the first time you see her smiling, and like it feels earned, and the payoff there is definitely there.
Absolutely. And I also think a lesser actress would try to make her more sympathetic for most of the film, but she really commits to this the idea of this mother as very distant and just sort of lost within herself and her own inability to express those warm feelings. And she's just very committed to this role that I don't know if there was a lot on the page, to be honest, for her to really work with. I think she really brings a lot to this character, especially in the end, like you said.
Yeah, completely agree.
So that's why I think we both really took to that performance. Let's get to a whole bunch of questions about the best years of our lives. So Scott Pyle said, how freaking great is Best Years of Our Lives? That's it. That's the question.
It's great.
It is freaking great. I agree. It's just, like I said, very nuanced and complex character drama at the end of the day, even if you take out the context of the relevancy of it. It's just does a really good job of balancing all 3 storylines and how they intertwine, and it was the right movie at the right moment, like I said.
Yeah.
Striper Main said, is Best Years of Our Lives one of the best Picture winners in Oscar history? Whoa, big one.
Big one.
What do we think?
I think it's pretty good. I think my one small critique with it, and while I still think it's very good and I would still 100% nominate it, I think that it focuses a little too much on the relationships, particularly the Fred and Peggy dynamic, and I wanted a little more of that post-war struggle. Like I feel like the Frederick March character doesn't really have a conclusion, and I think that I wanted more from that storyline and the specifics of his alcoholism, and I think I always wanted more of Harold Russell as Homer. I kept being like, when are we going to come back to him?
He's so great. Yeah,
he's so great.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I would put this certainly in the top half of Best Picture winners. Maybe even a top 20. I don't know. I would have to look back again, but yeah, I think it's just so strong in its message, even though it's almost 3 hours. I think it really earns all of that in telling this epic story, even if sometimes, even with all that screen time, like you said, it sort of trails off with the Frederick March character a bit. It's still just phenomenal. Fritz in the Oscars said, why do you think Frederick March got the attention and not Dana Andrews?
I'm guessing because, as someone who knows a bit of film history, I think of March's history as an actor, and I think this being like he was more of the veteran actor of this cast and of those nominees, and I think seeing him in this type of role a little bit older, I think that had an impact on people. But I do think that if there is a lead, I think it is Dana Andrews. I think
Agreed.
it starts and ends with him. I think that he always just felt like a clear through line lead. I would have probably nominated him in Best Actor as well, but I can see why the Frederick March performance was more lauded than his.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's on the younger end, and we know how they feel about actors who are younger in Best Actor. But no, I think he also just makes it look a little easier than the other performers here. And it feels like he's not doing as much stretching compared to others, but he really does have the emotional core ultimately. That, yeah, kind of a shame that he wasn't nominated, and I don't think he ever was.
Yeah, I don't think so.
So that's sad. But eventually he was president of the Screen Actors Guild. So look at him.
There you go.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so moving on to Mark Lamb, who said, if Dana Andrews had been nominated, would it have been supporting or lead? I think we both agree on lead.
Yeah, I think if they put him in supporting, that would be category fraud.
That's fraud, for sure.
Yeah.
This is from Jackson DeStefano saying, Be Kind Rewind brought this up in her 1946 video, but why didn't Myrna Loy get a nomination for Best Actress?
I mean, I think that there's, like I said, with the Dana Andrews role, it's difficult figuring out a lead. I guess she was top billed, which is very strange.
Yeah.
But I guess it was considered like her and Frederick March were like the quote unquote leads, and also I don't think she would have been put down into supporting. I do think she deserved a nomination. I think that she's great, especially in the first half.
Totally.
And I think the same with Teresa Wright. I would have put her in supporting. I think that both of them are great. I don't know why they didn't go for the female actresses in this film. I think that they, if anything, I think carry the film and are the like emotional center and like help support and lift up these men. But I think that they just weren't the focus of the campaign and of what people took out of the film at that time, at least.
It feels like this very male-focused story about soldiers that sometimes the women can just be thought of as a bit of an afterthought, even though these are great performances. I also love Virginia Mayo, and yeah, I mean, this entire cast all the way down to Kathy O'Donnell, I think, is great too. It's just... Best ensemble at the SAG Awards, if it happened, would certainly go to Best Years of Our Lives.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And of course, Juan Carlos Ollano, Myrna Loy in Best Years of Our Lives, lead or supporting.
She's probably technically supporting, but I think they would have put her in lead.
Agreed, just because she had that billing, and that mattered.
Yeah.
So, let's move on to some other films nominated for Best Picture. Interesting group. Very, very different films here.
Yeah,
of course,
eclectic.
We should first start off with a film that has most certainly endured from this lineup. It's A Wonderful Life.
My second favorite film of all time.
Oh my goodness. Well,
why do you think I picked this year?
Well, you can have the floor now if you have some things to say.
I mean, what is there to say about it that hasn't already been said as far as it as a film? I think we have to take ourselves out of what we think of it now and its cultural impact when looking at its Oscar trajectory. You know, the fact that it even got these nominations, I think, is kind of a miracle. I think it has more to do with Frank Capra as a figure in his track record than how the film did financially and whatnot. So I think that while I was disappointed that it wasn't considered the runner-up, I also get it because it didn't win anything, and that I don't think that there was really a likelihood of it winning at the time. I do think that, yeah, it is the film that's stood the test of time and endured the most out of this year. I do have my opinions on like additional nominations I would have given it, but I do think that the ones that it did get were very deserved and probably would have been my personal winners.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, a holiday classic. It's a classic for a reason. You know, one thing that people might not remember going back to this is that it takes a little while to really feel like it becomes a Christmas movie. Right?
Yeah, it's more of a character study.
Yeah.
And a portrait of a life than I think it is I think the whole him wishing he was never born is just the third act.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a lot more about looking at this person's life. And I think that all feels very warranted. I think that, the payoff of really seeing this person grow up and not get these chances and not putting himself first really then allows that payoff. I think that if you had a film where it didn't have as much of that in the beginning, first two acts, I think it wouldn't be as impactful and wouldn't be as considered one of the greatest films ever.
Yeah. And I think Jimmy Stewart is the exact right person for that part of George Bailey. Just this guy who is always putting others before himself, but can very often be taken advantage of just for who he is, for his kindness. And this is such a unique approach to a film in how it reveals the guardian angel thing at the beginning, but it sort of drops that after for a while as we get to know George and try to find out what would lead him to want to kill himself. And it has an interesting effect of lulling you into that world and his life. And then, the real hook of the film where the angel actually appears, it's with like 30 or 40 minutes to go until the end of the movie. That's at least 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I know that I just read the handful of criticism there's been of the film, have criticized that aspect of it. But I think I just really appreciate the approach of really showing you the impact that he has on people and how he's just trying to be like this honest man of the town. And his relationship with Donna Reed is so sweet, and I love it.
It's my favorite romance on film. I love it so much. That
the
my
thing
favorite
with the
scene,
moon. Oh my god.
My favorite scene is the honeymoon at the house.
Yes.
That's the line, remember when you threw the rocks at this old house, this is what I wish for. Oh, my favorite. My favorite.
Yeah, and it really makes the way he descends into that feeling of hopelessness, it makes all of that more heartbreaking because we've seen how much of an impact he's had on so many people. And then when the angel has him, seeing life, what it would be like without him if he wasn't even born, seeing the ripple effect of that, I think that's a very affecting and powerful moment of something that almost makes you think about yourself at the same time and how much impact you might have, even if you don't think that you do as much. So
yeah, completely.
Beautiful ending. Absolutely.
Oh,
and
yeah, I cry the whole time.
Tears everywhere. Oh my God. It's I can't get over that ending.
Yeah.
They're all gathered together and they're all singing. It can be, you can say that it's a little cheesy, but I think it completely earns that ending.
Yeah, and I think that I don't think there's any scenes or moments of the beginning part that I would take out because I think that they're all like puzzle pieces to what you get with that third act.
Yeah. So let's get to a few questions. This is from Jeffrey Kerr, who said, "It's a Wonderful Life received 5 Oscar nominations, but went home empty-handed. Did it deserve to win anything?" Well, Casey thinks so.
I definitely, Frederick March is great, but I would have given Jimmy Stewart Best Actor. I think it's his best performance. I would have also, given it picture and director. I would have given it everything that it
clean
was.
Sweep.
Personally, yes.
Sound recording.
Sure. It's got some interesting sound work. They have the clever, when he says, "I want to live again," the sound changes.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, there's things there. This
Film editing, even.
Yeah.
Even over Best Years of Our Lives. I think I'd actually agree that film editing at the very least. I won't reveal my thoughts on what should have won until a little later, but...
Okay, fair.
But yeah, I think it definitely deserved to win multiple Oscars, and I will agree with you that Jimmy Stewart absolutely should have won Best Actor for this.
Yeah, and I get that he won for The Philadelphia Story, but a lot of people looking back kind of find that a weird win with his filmography.
Yeah.
I think some of his better performances came in years where it was just not happening. Like, I think that he could have won in 39 as well for Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, but I think that, sometimes there's just different things.
Well, you set up this next question beautifully, so thank you.
Oh, of course.
Joe Gouveia said, do you think had Stewart not won in 1940, he would have rightly won here?
If he had one, yeah, absolutely. Plus, I think the story, while even though the film wasn't like a commercial hit by any means, I do think that the significance of this being his first film after the war and him not really sure if he wanted to go back into acting and like the emotional resonancy of that performance, I think that could have catapulted it to a win. I think also even Frederick March had won before, although it was a long time ago and it was a tie win.
Mm-hmm.
So who knows? But I think that because of the recency, and I think that had he not won before, I think that would have carried him over into a win. But I think that both the lack of impact the film made at the time and him having already won kind of sealed the deal there.
Yeah. I do think that there would have been a narrative there for him and that he could have been like, this is where you reward It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
Sort of thing. Because he is so clearly, the face of the film. That's a nice place to reward that. So.
Yeah, and I think if there was one place I would award it of its nominations, that would be it.
Yeah. Juan Carlos Ollano said, was Donna Reed close to an Oscar nom? If yes, for which category?
I think she should have been. I would have, even though I think you can make the argument for lead, I would have put her in supporting, and I think she also would have been at the level of an actress where she would be okay with that. She later won supporting, so I think that wouldn't be out of the question for her to be in that category. I think that it teeters on lead and supporting. You can make the argument for either.
Yeah.
But I don't think she's the kind of actress where it was like, oh, she could only be in lead.
Yeah. I think if you're just watching the film, like for the first half, you could be like, okay, Donna Reed is clearly a lead here, but it really... sidelines, maybe it's not the right word for this, but just it doesn't focus that much on her in the end. So I would say supporting. So Mark Lamb said, nowadays we would favor Stewart over March. Back then, was Stewart real competition, or was this just a slam dunk for March?
I mean, like you said, the precursors went to Gregory Peck and Laurence Olivier, so I feel like not really.
Yeah, sadly, even though, again, looking back on it, he would seem like presumably the runner-up in that category. There's not a lot of evidence for that, ultimately. So, I guess no to both questions. I think there was competition here, and that it was not a set thing that March was going to win this, and that Stewart was probably like fourth, which is weird to say.
Yeah.
But that's the reality sometimes. And, well, this is the artist formerly known as Glenda Miss Jackson, if you nasty, but has now become Dula Peep.
Dula Peep.
Yes. Do you think any of the supporting men in It's a Wonderful Life deserve nominations?
I would have gone with either Henry Travers as Clarence or Thomas Mitchell as Uncle Billy. I think either of those. I think they also feel like supporting performances at that time. I mean, Thomas Mitchell had previously won supporting and was like a regular character actor in those types of roles. So I think that those made sense. I think they also are lovely presences in this film. I think Lionel Barrymore has a little more of a one-note villainous performance. It's not bad necessarily, but I wouldn't have nominated it compared to those two.
I love Henry Travers in this.
I know. He shows up briefly in The Yearling. I was pleasantly surprised.
Oh, wow. Yes. You're right.
As like the store clerk selling him the harmonica. I was just like, Clarence, what are you doing here?
Look at him. What a year. Yeah. I think I would have nominated him. He's adorable in It's a Wonderful Life, and also creates a distinct character with not too much to do.
Yeah, and he always feels believable, even in a role that's, not necessarily like realistic necessarily, but it always feels believable.
Yeah, totally. This is from Next to the Aisle, who said, is this one of the great 1-2 punches in Oscar history? Years won, as it was positive following World War II in comparison to darker invert of American Dream in Capra's classic.
I mean, I think both of those the films are darker
Yeah.
looks in America, and both end up having pretty happy endings, I would say. So,
Hmm.
a similar formula.
Yeah. And it's another thing that makes me wish that I could have gone with It's a Wonderful Life as a runner-up here, just because they contrast each other very well, I think. But yeah, no, I think that they both are. I think this is one of those cases where I am fascinated by the Oscars and like how they are able to reflect a certain sentiment in the time period, and so yeah, I think they're both very representative of 1946.
Yeah, absolutely.
Henry V. So, this is our Laurence Olivier film that comes before Hamlet, which wins Best Picture. But I feel a little guilty about this one because
Neat.
I watched it and then I read some of the reviews from the time. I looked at some recent reviews even on Letterboxd. Lots of praise overall, and I get it. I think that the way that the film shifts between the performance of the play theatrically, transitioning into the main action, all those meta aspects are cool. But I struggled with this one.
We're in the exact same place. Yeah, I think that
Yes.
having the play within the film and having it start that way at the Globe, I think it's very clever. I think that especially looking at Shakespeare's history plays, taking it as more of an adaptation of that play rather than, a story of that actual real life figure, I think is an interesting look at it. But yeah, I was so bored. And I kept waiting for one big climactic moment. And it kind of is with the Band of Brothers speech that's the most famous piece
Onto
of
the
writing
breach.
from this.
Yes.
But that is about it.
Yeah. There's the Battle of Agincourt there, where, Henry V is hoping to claim the throne in France, and they have this battle, and England unexpectedly won over France, and that's that. And that's pretty much the end.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't care. I have to be honest with people. I don't
Yeah.
care about this story, and it hurts to say that just as like a former English major and someone who really studied Shakespeare.
Yep.
This has never been something that I've cared about.
Me either.
Any
Yeah,
of the Henry stories.
same. Yeah, I was a theater major in college, so I read a lot of Shakespeare
Okay.
as well, and it was
Yeah.
always like I was more interested in more of the character based stories rather than like, and I'm this way with things outside of Shakespeare, but like the war epic and it being all just about conquering rather than having any really. It never felt like there was any internal conflict or
Right.
any
Exactly.
interpersonal things. It looks nice. I would have nominated it in the color cinematography and art direction categories, which weirdly had two nominees.
Yeah, it should definitely be in cinematography. I don't know what happened there.
Especially once it exits the theater, a lot of those like nighttime exteriors with the
Mm.
lighting, I think were really nice. It's got
Oh
a great
yeah.
color palette.
Yeah. And the intro where it's just like I don't want to say a drone shot, but the
Crane? Would it be a crane that
yes.
probably?
Yes, just flying over England I think is very well captured. Same thing with the ending. It really bookends well there.
Hmm?
I like that. It's just I think Laurence Olivier is a very fine actor and inhabits these roles, and they just fit like a glove, and I respect that completely. And I get why that people respect the fact that he really brought Shakespeare to the masses, but in this case I just can't do it. I can't get invested in this.
Me either.
I've
Yeah,
tried.
I think his honorary Oscar and its specifics of adapting Shakespeare for the screen and whatnot, I think that was warranted, but I'm glad he won for Hamlet and not this.
Agreed. Yes. And I suppose we could get into a little bit of just the overall sentiment of the Academy when it came to films that were foreign, and by foreign in this case we mean anything not from Hollywood.
Yeah.
So that would include British films in this case. And there was a real conflict here between wanting to recognize films like this from England within a US based academy, and feeling like, what does this say about what we produce here in Hollywood? You know? So I think that's an interesting factor here, where there's people on both sides feeling like this is still great work that we really want to honor, and it gets nominated for Best Picture. And obviously Laurence Olivier gets a Best Actor nomination, he gets an honorary award, and all of that is recognized. But there's also a vocal group of people who are like, what are we doing here, guys? So
Yeah, which I'm like, if you had that mentality, don't nominate for Best Picture. You could pick something else.
yeah, there are other British films here that could have been nominated.
Yeah.
I would argue.
Yeah.
More on that later. But this was from Joey Ailman saying, do you think the special award for Olivier hindered his chances in Best Actor, even though he won at New York and the National Board of Review? And if so, why not also for Harold Russell?
Well, yeah, I think that it did hinder Olivier's chance of winning, but I was reading up on Russell's honorary, and the whole point was that they were like, well, we don't think he'll actually win, so that we do want to honor him.
And then he won.
And so he's the only person that has 2 Oscars for the same performance.
Yeah.
And in the same film.
Right.
So.
Yeah. So I definitely do think that really impacted Laurence Olivier in particular. And it's easy, at least for me, to see why that would happen because of that mentality. And also just for Harold Russell in particular, I think there was such a rooting factor there for him.
Yeah.
As this was his first performance, you know, and that this was not an act. He really did have those 2 hooks for hands.
Yeah.
And so I think there was a lot of emotion behind wanting to reward him in supporting actor as well, because he deserved it.
He did.
Yeah. Okay, so The Razor's Edge, our other Best Picture nominee here. This is the big adaptation of a novel of this lineup that really is tackling some very big themes. I think it has a very great American novel vibe to it.
Oh yeah.
Where it's of course about a straight white man and his problems.
Mm-hmm.
Of coming from humble beginnings, going through the war and coming out of it a little disillusioned and looking for meaning and enlightenment. And there's romance here and there, and there's Gene Tierney and Anne Baxter. There's Uncle Elliot, played by Clifton Webb, who is not stated as gay, but is clearly gay.
Oh, yeah. Especially by the end when he's, spoiler alert, dying.
Mm-hmm.
And just the way that he, talks about his life and these things, I'm just like, I don't even think they're trying to hide it. They're just not saying it, but they're not hiding it either.
Yeah. I don't know if I really liked this as a film, to be honest, but it really strikes me as the kind of story that, again, is a lot more compelling on the page.
Yeah, I think that the film both feels really long, and certain plot points feel drawn out and long, particularly when he's on his travels, in the sequences in India and in the mountains and things. But then other plot points feel underdeveloped. I think the character of Sophie, played by Anne Baxter, who's great in it, I think I needed so much more. And I don't blame her for that at all.
Yeah.
I think you get more reading the summary of this on Wikipedia or whatever than what the film is giving you.
That's what I mean. Exactly.
It's wild.
Yeah.
And the amount where it's we really don't need to spend this much time on this certain thing.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. I think that the pacing overall is very much on the slow side, to where there's a lot that's happening, but also some of these scenes just go on way too long.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Anne Baxter is really, really good.
Yeah, you definitely get that transformation of her character and that arc. And I think it was also interesting seeing a pre All About Eve performance from her, that you can see that fire in her in there.
Totally. And she really brings that character to life. For those who haven't seen the film, she's playing a woman who has gone through a pretty major tragedy of losing her husband and her child, and she basically becomes a drunk and is really never the same.
Yeah.
Just a very, very heartfelt performance there. And yeah, that's one of the biggest parts of the film that actually managed to affect me in any way.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I mean, Tyrone Power here is playing the lead. I don't know.
Yeah, it's pretty nothing, I feel like.
Yeah. But we got a question about that from Catherine Short saying, is the role of Larry Darrell nearly impossible to play, what with him being perfect, and do you think that Tyrone Power's performance hurts the Razor's Edge?
I mean, I think that on the one hand, I guess, yeah, he's supposed to be this figure, but I don't think you ever get proven that from him. I think also on the flip side of that, you have Uncle Elliot who treats him terribly.
Yeah.
The entire time I'm like, he sucks. I'm like, calm down, man. And like even Isabel's mother's like, I don't know, I'm just gonna let her live her life.
It just didn't really register for me, unfortunately, the Tyrone Power performance, which is supposed to be the real anchor of everything.
Yeah, I think that there's something to the story that could be adapted well and better, although apparently there was a film in the 80s with Bill Murray as the lead, which is an interesting...
Yeah, that's a choice.
But I do think that kind of similar possibly to Greta Gerwig's Little Women adaptation, that you could do something with this text. I do think there's some interesting beats and character things here that could be done better. I don't necessarily think that it's completely unadaptable. I think the way that they chose to adapt it is strange. Also having the author of the book be a character, telling the story.
That was wild.
And him just randomly showing up places and not aging and all that. It's strange.
Yeah. Choices were made. And also I was fascinated just with the Jean Tierney character and sort of the evolution.
Oh yeah, she takes. Evil.
Oh yeah. I was like, damn, okay.
Great costumes.
Great gowns, beautiful gowns.
Great gowns.
Totally. But yeah, I don't know. I think I will agree that it's a story that could be adapted well if it was told by the right director. And this was not nominated for Best Director, and I sort of understand why.
Yeah, I think I would have still nominated it probably. I don't remember if it was in cinematography, but I thought it looked nice. And same with the
It was not, by the way. But yeah.
There wasn't a lot then that was nominated also. Right. That's a whole other thing.
It's nominated for art direction.
That I would agree with. You know, I think that also it's interesting the amount of the film that takes place abroad.
Yes.
Is very interesting. A lot of it in Paris and things. I think that there's a lot of interesting interiors design there. And I think Anne Baxter's win is warranted, and I would have still nominated her, but that's kind of it.
Yeah, I would agree. So that is the Best Picture lineup. Kind of a mixed bag, but I think there's some really good stuff at the top there. That is,
I think there's 2 great films and 3 that I could do without.
Pretty much, yeah. Let's get to our Shoulda Been a Contender segment. Yay! This is other films that came out in 1946 that were not nominated for Best Picture that we wanted to highlight. So, Casey, let's talk about it.
Our beloved Brief Encounter.
Oh, my lord. Yes.
One of my favorite films.
Yes. Go.
This is like my 3rd or 4th time watching it, and I'm just caught off guard by how much I cry. I almost think you cry more the more times you watch it, of certain, particularly the first half, kind of knowing where it ends up and certain lines feeling like they have such significance. I love the screenplay so much. I think that it's some of the best use of voiceover ever, of really getting into the main character of Laura. And I think that there's just so many lines where it feels bold and goes there and very honest with her character towards the end. And I think that it's incredibly intimate and it's just very beautiful and sad.
Mm-hmm. Love it.
Love it. Beautiful and sad. Great.
That is my shit. Yeah. So when I think about Brief Encounter, I just think of the word exquisite, really.
Yeah.
It's just, this is such an influential film and really helping to kick off this very specific genre that I love, that I have talked about and that I have tweeted about incessantly, which is two characters who meet, they spend time together, they realize that they're going to have to part ways due to any number of circumstances. And there is this bittersweet ending in that these two characters have such a deep personal connection that you want them to stay together, but you just know that it can't be, and it just breaks your heart. But it's also so fulfilling, I think, at the same time, just to see that kind of just like a once in a lifetime falling in love with someone passion. It's just passion.
Yeah.
That you may not be together in the end, but you'll always think of them. I think that's so beautiful.
Yeah. It was interesting having this being my first time rewatching it since having seen Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which I think is a similar type of format.
Yes.
And it made me wonder if there had been an ending similar to that ending of like, I saw him one last time, and that type of I broke. I was like, I have to go.
That's beautiful. Oh, jeez.
But it also ends wonderfully. I think because I think that it has that good balance of both of them not disliking their spouses in any way and not being unhappy. Mm-hmm. It just, they got very caught off guard.
Yeah.
So I think that the ending with her and her husband feels earned of like this is still good.
Yeah.
And his line when he's like, "You've been away a long time. I fall apart."
Yeah. Celia the Johnson. Oh my God.
One of my favorite actress performances ever. One of my favorite Best Actress nominees ever. I just think that she also has this very specific voice and accent that I've never heard. I know that she's British, but it always just, there's a certain tone of her voice I can't fully describe, and how she says certain things that I love so much. And her eyes. Oh my God. Her
eyes are just so expressive. And you always know all of the emotions that she's going through. And she's stuck in this marriage that she doesn't really find particularly fulfilling anymore that much. And she meets this man who provides an opportunity for her to like have passion again, who shares a similar interest to her, wants to go to the movies with her, And
he's so handsome. I love Trevor Howard.
He's a cutie. Yeah. As this handsome doctor, it's like this fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that the film really charts her journey to experiencing that kind of heartbreak ultimately it's told with just this sensitivity also, I think, from David Lean that you just don't see at this point in film history, but even now it's just like so intimate and delicate.
Yeah.
And it's really quite astonishing what he's able to do with 90 minutes here. It's pretty short. It's pretty brief.
It's very short.
Yeah. So, but that last moment that they have together in the cafe. Oh, Lord.
Then later kind of replicated in Carol.
Yes, with the hand on the shoulder. Oh, my goodness. the point where she says that she wants to die. And then he tells her, if you die, you'd forget me. I want to be remembered.
Oh.
I'm on the floor.
And then she basically almost tries to kill herself by jumping in front of the train. It's like, I couldn't do it. And not that I thought of anything else. I just didn't move.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I said about being so bold and honest. I think for this time period, it never feels like it's sugarcoating anything or feel because it's not a Hollywood movie, and it feels that difference is there.
Yeah, you're so right. I just don't think Hollywood would have done a story like this.
No.
I don't even know if they would have cast Celia Johnson, to be honest. Or Trevor Howard for that matter.
Yeah.
It would have just thrown everything off. And that final moment where she's back with her husband and he says, "You've been a long way away. Thank you for coming back to me." Yeah, I mean, I I just sit there and I'm just like, damn,
Yep.
they did that. Absolutely gorgeous film on the Criterion Channel right now. If you haven't seen it, please, my God, please watch Brief Encounter.
Yeah, watch it. Y'all have the time.
Yes, yes. Experience this beautiful little love story.
Mm-hmm.
So we got a number of questions about this, naturally. From Ronaldo Sosa, please just talk about Celia Johnson's eyes,
Ugh.
which we did a little bit.
I also love the shot when she's on the train and she's happy and she's looking out the window and you have her reflection and then she's like fantasizing their life. Oh, I love that part.
Yes. Such a captivating actress who
Yeah.
didn't really do a lot of other film work.
Yeah. But I think that the film does a good job of fully her being the lead character, you know, with the voiceover, with it always feeling like it's her point of view, which I feel like there's not a lot of films at this time with a female protagonist that is that forward.
Yep, totally. I'm just so glad that the director's branch was smart enough to nominate David Lean here, because could easily see this just being passed up.
Yeah, but I'm glad that even if it didn't win those awards, I'm glad that it at least got the nominations.
Yeah. This is from Sundays with Kate, saying, why did Brief Encounter miss out on a Best Picture nom despite noms for writing, directing, and acting? Too British? Is that
too
it?
British, I guess. And they already had Henry V filling that slot. I think that you could have easily swapped them out if you wanted that to be your British entry, and I think it would have been much better.
Totally. Yeah. But with Henry V, I think there was just a lot more of a story behind that.
Yeah.
Overall, there was just more of a narrative there than I think there was with Brief Encounter. So that's probably why. But I think it was close. So that leads us to Andrew Carden's question, saying, was Brief Encounter 6th for Best Picture?
I would either say that or which got a lot of nominations. Even though it didn't get that director nomination, I think that it had a lot of nominations, so I think that probably was a factor.
You dropped out with the film that you said, sorry.
Oh, sorry. The Jolson Story was the one that I had, because it got so many nominations, even though it didn't get director. I think that, that number of nominations was probably more likely than, say, that or The Killers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I will say that Brief Encounter was probably 6th. I would also throw in another film that was a big story that was certainly campaigned a lot, which was Duel in the Sun, and that only managed 2 nominations for Best Actress and Best Supporting Actress, but was very much campaigned heavily, at least according to many of the things that I've read from this time period, and was actually being predicted to get nominations, but didn't happen.
Interesting. I missed that one, unfortunately.
Yes, as did I, but from Kevin Clowder saying, do you think the Best Picture nomination for Henry V kept Brief Encounter from getting a nomination? I think absolutely. Yeah. Yes, I think it was a case of like, well, you have one. We're not going to do 2.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably it for questions here. But yes, I think honestly, for any film from 1946, I think this actually came out in 1945 in Britain, technically. But for Oscar qualifying purposes, we can call it a 1946 movie. This is the film to watch. Absolutely. So, well, looking to other films, I want to talk about Notorious.
Oh, my other fave.
Yes. Miss Ingrid Bergman, Alfred Hitchcock, Cary Grant. Can't go wrong with that combination. And I think it's one of his best.
Once the plot really starts with the introduction of the Claude Rains character, and I think this film really gets moving, and it pays off. The suspense is there.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. And for those who haven't seen it, who don't know about it, it's about a woman played by Ingrid Bergman. Father was a German spy, I believe, and she's sent to Brazil. Government agent played by Cary Grant is helping her do some spy craft. and exploit this relationship with this guy played by Claude Rains, the Invisible Man himself. Lots of great melodrama, lots of great suspense. I think Ingrid Bergman is so good here. She
should have been nominated. She's so good. I was about to say it's my favorite performance of hers, and then I remembered Autumn Sonata. It's one of my favorite performances of hers. And yeah, I think she should have been nominated. I think Claude Rains was very deserved nominee. I probably still would have gone with Harold Russell, but I think that Claude Rains' nomination was very deserved.
Oh, yes. I just love how the film just puts together all of its pieces.
Yeah.
Just like, what's in the wine bottles in the cellar. It's
and
also
the key.
Yes, that key. And that, I think it's also just very open almost about just the whole, like, the way that the government operates, the American government, portraying it as like sort of a shady organization almost. It's an interesting thing to see in 1946.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see this film tackling like taking down Nazis this soon after, and like yeah, and I think that the ending is very almost haunting.
Yes, I love that ending. Oh my God, it's so perfect. But I would definitely nominate Ingrid Bergman. I think she has pretty good chemistry with Cary Grant. I love that pairing. Maybe not nominate him, but I think maybe Alfred Hitchcock would deserve a nomination for this one too.
For directing, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have another film?
Yeah, I don't know when its U.S. release was, but I'm pretty sure it was this year, was another Palin Pressburger, which you've talked about a lot recently. Yeah. A Matter of Life and Death came out this year, which I love, and I think should have been a contender, definitely. Should have been a contender. I feel like it probably almost got disqualified in text for being a pretty even mix of black and white and Technicolor.
Yeah.
Which probably might have hurt it, but I think that if they had one single category, or if they picked one, I think it should have been nominated in both of the art direction and cinematography. And I think that David Niven in the lead role is phenomenal. For those that haven't seen it, it's about a man who escapes death, and basically the afterlife is like, we missed you. You have to come die now. But he fell in love with a radio operator just before he, quote unquote, was supposed to die. And it's kind of him having to prove that he fell in love to not then be taken to the afterlife. It's an interesting concept. It kind of reminds me a bit of the whimsicalness of something like It's a Wonderful Life. In those, like, how it interprets death and the otherworldly or whatever. And I think that it's just very well done. I think the score is really great. It's really clever, and I think that it has a very tear-jerkery, heartwarming ending, and it's one of Palin Pressburger's best, and they were some of the best of that era, so it makes sense.
Very good. Haven't seen it, but sounds great.
Highly recommend, especially if you like The Red Shoes and Black Narcissus. I think that it's a must.
Definitely. Nice. Well, we can talk about The Killers, which is the other directing nominee from this year that was not nominated for picture. Film noir. Here we are with another film noir starring Burt Lancaster in his first leading role.
You have Montgomery Clift as your boyfriend. Burt Lancaster's mine.
Oh my goodness.
So cute.
He is a snack in this film. I will say that.
The boxing scenes.
Yeah. Yeah, this is the beginning of Bert's career here. I've been talking about him since probably Atlantic City, 1981. He's had a long career, but yeah, this is where it all started for him. What do you think of The Killers?
I liked it. I really liked the opening with the two killers coming into that diner. I think that it does a good job of being like, what's going on here, and setting that up very well. It almost has a Citizen Kane structure.
Yes.
Kind of piecing together the man after death and having these various stories, which I think is interesting. I think that the direction nomination was probably deserved. I think it was very well directed. I also really liked the cinematography. There's some great shots. I really like when they're pulling off their heist or whatever. It's all shown like kind of from above, looking at the cars and the people almost running around is really interesting. But I find it to be good, not great.
Mm-hmm.
Ava Gardner, it's not her best acting.
Sure. That's
Personally.
fair. Yeah. But definitely a clever storytelling technique here. And this is based on a Hemingway short story. And that was expanded out. And I know that Hemingway said that this was the first Hollywood adaptation of one of his works that he thought was good.
Oh, good.
Yeah. So, I guess he just thought that nothing that came before really just executed the vision of his stories. But he really liked The Killers, that it's easy to see why. I think it's compellingly crafted on an editing standpoint alone. And Burt Lancaster's great. Ava Gardner, solid here. Femme fatale, standard sort of role. I watched this and it made me realize like how many film noirs I had been watching lately from this time period. And I will say that I was a little bit fatigued just with a lot of the tropes and whatnot. So I think this is one that I might give another look somewhere down the line outside the context of all of this. But certainly an effective one and really interesting ending. Love that.
Yeah.
Love that twist. Well, we also have Gilda,
Yeah.
Rita Hayworth.
Beautiful.
Oh, yes. And thinking about actresses who I think should have been nominated for Best Actress, I do think Rita Hayworth is deserving of that discussion here. And this was her sort of definitive role. I think casual movie fans will probably know the shot of her entering the frame from below and flipping her hair up and being like, me? Yeah, that was my impression of Rita Hayworth. And this is, of course, featured in The Shawshank Redemption. But anyway, another film noir here. Glenn Ford is this gambler, starts working for a new boss. The boss's girlfriend ends up being Gilda, and he recognizes her as someone he used to go out with. And I'm really not a fan of the ending, per se.
I'm not a fan of a lot of this movie. I think she's quite good. I don't love the way the character's written.
Yeah.
I think Johnny sucks, the Glenn Ford character.
Yes.
And not to necessarily fully spoil the ending, but it makes me kind of mad.
Mm-hmm.
That how it ends up of like, this is not... What? This should not happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think the film's at its best with her musical numbers.
Yes.
I think they're wonderful. Even just the one when she, like, the bar is closed and she's just playing the acoustic guitar for the bathroom attendant. I think that's nice. And her costumes are great, and her hair.
Yep. Of course. Love her singing, love her dancing, love her just being so confident and cool. Which is why, it's a little bit of a letdown to see her end up with the Glenn Ford character.
It feels so unearned.
Who is trash. And very much beneath her.
I think also, compared to other noirs I watched, also, like, I'll talk about it in a bit, but Humphrey Bogart in The Big Sleep, just fully knowing how to handle a gun and seem cool. And Glenn Ford is just, like, it all seems kind of sloppy.
Yeah.
At points. And I think he's better in things like The Big Heat, but it's just... Yeah, like I'm just like, oh, other people do this better.
No, this is true.
They also write the character really unlikable.
It makes me wonder how much of that was intentional. But
I don't know.
Yeah, I know. I would say this is not a film that I would say is like, this should be nominated for Best Picture, but I think Rita Hayworth should have gotten some consideration at the very least. So, yeah. Do you have another film?
Yeah, Orson Welles' The Stranger came out this year, another film noir, one that I think stood apart a bit from the others in how I think unconventional it is. It takes place in like a small town in Connecticut. I think Connecticut. I could be wrong. I don't remember at this very moment, but a lot of like daytime suburban type shots in a film noirs are interesting. It's got some very bold, not necessarily twists, but bold scenes that like I'm like, oh, you went there, which I think was a testament to Wells as a filmmaker. And I think that as far as an unconventional noir that has like some of the tropes but in a different setting and with a different type of look to it, I think is interesting. And I definitely think that I would watch this one again. I think Wells is great in it. I I would have put him in supporting personally, but he would have never put himself in supporting. So,
Lord knows that's true. Yeah.
but yeah, I think he's great in it. It reminds me a little bit of like the level of a character of like a Harry Lime in The Third Man, like that
Yeah.
type of role. A little more maniacal, a little more evil, but like that type of screen time and that amount of that level of a character, I should say.
Yeah. Haven't seen it.
It's good. It's on Netflix and I think Amazon as well. So it's on a bunch of streaming, and it wasn't that long either. So.
Yeah, I definitely was gonna try to watch this, but I was a little bit film noired out.
Don't blame you. This was one of the first ones I watched, and I think it being probably the better one, I think they got progressively worse almost.
Yeah. It's also just been like a crazy busy week for me, but that's neither here nor there. But we did get this question from Brandon Stanwyck about The Stranger, saying, would you have given The Stranger more than just a writing nomination?
Yeah, like I said, I would have nominated Wells for acting. I do think that, again, I think the role is supporting, but he wouldn't have put himself in supporting, and it would have kind of been as a lead nomination, so it's kind of hard to say with that. I think it's also well shot and well directed, so I think that those wouldn't be bad options either, but I think the writing is a good place to put it because I think it is a clever story. Again, one about Nazis, kind of. So it's an interesting companion to Notorious in that way.
I want to talk about To Each His Own.
I'm mad I missed this one. It was hard to find.
It is incredibly difficult to find in a legitimate streaming service. Let's just say that. But I was able to see it. We don't have to get into the details. So, yes, this is our Best Actress winner, Olivia de Havilland, playing a woman who has a child out of wedlock and tries to not make it like a big thing. And she tries to give her son away, but then trying to adopt him back, basically. So it doesn't really seem like she had a child out of wedlock, that sort of thing. Doesn't really work out. And she goes through a lot of difficulty as she's like watching her son grow up from afar. But I think she's really, really good here. It's a very juicy role with a lot of complicated feelings that she has to convey because, you know, she's also becoming a businesswoman as she's struggling with her personal life. And I just think she's able to convey this strength, but also vulnerability at the same time. I think she's one of the masters at that, especially in this time period. And the ending is also very, very moving in a way that feels earned. It's a bit of a melodramatic story overall, but I guess if you're attuned to like this kind of style, I think it's worth it, if only just to watch Olivia here in yet another complex performance from this era. I mean, this on top of The Snake Pit and The Heiress, I think really just cemented her status as a legend in the 40s. I don't know personally if I would have given this to her over Celia Johnson.
I was gonna ask.
Yeah. But in a vacuum, completely makes sense that she won this.
Yeah. And like was mentioned in a previous question, the Be Kind Rewind video on this Best Actress race, it makes sense why she won. And then I think was then, you know, the domino effect of her then doing films like The Snake Pit and The Heiress and then winning that second Oscar. I think that this was kind of helped start that, being that she had her very infamous contract war with Warner Brothers and then not working for several years, that her winning for this film kind of helped solidify her and then get her those better roles later on. But it also, like, and she also says in that video of like it's interesting the types of women that the Academy was choosing to nominate and reward, of these more motherly domestic figures as opposed to these more naughty femme fatales, is an interesting look at it.
Or women like what Celia Johnson is playing, you know?
Yeah.
Someone who's going out and flirting with other men.
Yeah.
That sort of thing. But yeah, that's probably one thing that weirdly helped her. But from Catherine Short. Again, we have, why do more people not watch To Each His Own, and why is Olivia de Havilland's performance so underrated? A loaded question, once again. But
It's because it's hard to find.
it's incredibly difficult to find this movie. Like I said, not available to stream anywhere. So, yeah. Is it on DVD? I think it might be, but otherwise it's just way too difficult to even find it. And even someone like yourself who is preparing for this podcast is finding difficulty watching it, then good luck to anyone else.
Yeah, I tried.
Yeah. But I think that is probably a reason that this performance is underrated, because not a lot of people have seen it. That's pretty much it. But
Yeah.
I definitely wish that more people would dive into Olivia's career at this time period, because it's, like I said, such incredible, juicy work that she's always part of these like very female-centered films where she is so clearly the lead of her film. This is no co-lead situation in any of these films. And so I think that's an interesting study if you wanted to look into the films she did in this decade.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, with her, and there's a lot of films of this era that you'll get to, of like Mrs. Miniver and Mildred Pierce, of these female-fronted films getting that type of recognition. It's interesting.
Yep. So, do we have another film?
Yeah, The Big Sleep came out this year. Another kind of noir-ish. It's a little convoluted, but all of them kind of are.
Yeah.
And I think this one, sold itself on it being the Bogey and Bacall team up. It makes sense where their characters end up. You can figure out based on their personal relationship and what they would want to bring to the film. But they're both great. You get the appeal of Humphrey Bogart as a movie star in this film. He just seems so cool and effortless and good at his job and knows exactly what he's doing. The screenplay is very good. I think there's some clever dialogue to it. It's also very horny. Oh God, what's her? Dorothy. I'm blanking on her last name. Dorothy Malone has a tiny one scene role as like working in a bookshop, and you can tell that there might have maybe been, apparently the film had been kind of re-edited once Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall became an item of making it more about their relationship, that maybe this character kind of got short shift. But there's a scene with them where the innuendo and just the way that they're speaking to each other, and her with her glasses and all these things, where I'm like, oh, this is a lot here. And you only see her once, and I'm like, where's the payoff to that? But it's an interesting look at of like what you could get away with during the Hays Code of having a more erotic film, not as much as something like Double Indemnity, but on that level, I would say. And there's also some interesting kills in it and set pieces of like this casino, kind of similar to something like Gilda, but I think a little more likable characters personally. And yeah, it's good.
Well, we got this question from Brandon Stanwyck saying, how many nominations would you have given to The Big Sleep?
Probably just for writing, if any.
Which I don't think it got anything.
Yeah. No. But yeah, I would have nominated for writing wherever, of all those writing categories that had them, whichever one it qualified for.
Yes, there's 3 different writing awards at this point.
Oh God, best story.
Best original screenplay, best screenplay, which I guess is adapted, and best motion picture story.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm pretty much done
with
major films that I wanted to talk about. But there's just a few other questions that involve, in particular, the supporting actress category. So looking beyond Anne Baxter, there's some very weird stuff happening here that does not hold up to today's standards, or really even then is a little questionable, where we have some doing performances of different races.
Oh.
For example. Because we got this from Mark Lamb saying, is the most non-PC / bordering racist nomination in Oscar lore for Flora Robson. So Flora Robson is in Saratoga Trunk. Flora Robson is a white British actress playing a non-white person.
Oh, no.
I think she's playing a maid. Yes, I'm reading here that she's playing a Haitian maid.
Oh, God.
And if you see pictures of her in this film, which I looked up, it's really unsettling.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And I know that this was a time where that sort of thing still happened, but even then it was sort of considered like, we should be staying away from this a little more now. Now that we're out of the, ironically, with something like the Jolson story being nominated this year, getting away from like the Al Jolson sort of thing. So
Yeah.
Anyway, that's kind of unsettling. But any other thoughts on this year?
No, I think we pretty much covered it all. I think that there's some very great films nominated. I think there's other films that should have been nominated in certain places, but overall I feel good about everything. I think it's a good crop of winners. I think I'll say that.
Yes. This is actually now that I'm looking at it, this is a really good acting class of winners here that we don't often get from this time period. Sometimes they just don't hold up, but this year totally love all of these performances, even if maybe I would have given Jimmy Stewart the best actor one.
Yeah,
and Celia Johnson the best actress one.
Yeah, I can't speak for the Olivia de Havilland performance, but I don't dislike Frederick March, so I don't think that they're bad performances winning by any means. And yeah, both Harold Russell and Anne Baxter would have been my wins. So
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, when we come back, we'll be delivering our verdict as to whether we think the best years of our lives deserve that Best Picture win, or if maybe The Yearling did. Who knows?
These are the great personalities who bring a memorable experience to glowing light. Samuel Goldwyn's masterpiece. The screenplay was written by Robert E. Sherwood, Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright of Petrified Forest and Idiot's Delight. From this, William Wyler, who won the Academy Award for his direction of Mrs. Miniver, wove a pattern of motion picture magic, with Myrna Loy and Frederick March living through the heartwarming second bloom of love. Dana Andrews and Teresa Wright feeling the breathtaking thrill of love at first sight. Hoagie Carmichael spreading his own brand of stardust. All of them together, giving all of us the best years of our lives.
And we're back. So now we'll be delivering our verdict as to whether we think the best years of our lives deserve Best Picture or if The Yearling deserved it. Casey Lee Clark, I'm desperate to know your answer.
I think of the two, it definitely went to the right winner in Best Years of Our Lives. I think that
What a shock, yes.
What a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
I think as timely then, I think holds up now. I think it does a good job of showing a realistic portrayal of post-World War II life in America, and I think that it is an American epic of sorts, like I said, but I think that it is very satisfying as a film, and I think it's both entertaining and thought-provoking, and I think that that is why it ended up winning over something like The Yearling, which doesn't really hold up, feels a little cheesy and over the top at points, and just ultimately feels less important compared to Best Years of Our Lives.
Yes. I will agree with you. The Best Years of Our Lives definitely deserved it over The Yearling at the very least, and that it was pretty much the exact right film for the moment. It was the moment for 1946, and it had such a phenomenal ensemble of actors, and you could really see why it caught on the way that it did. And it won 7 out of 8 Oscars, and I can't really argue with any of them. And I would probably just give it sound recording over the Jolston story sight unseen to just make it a clean sweep. So yeah, this is one of those cases where I think a film just totally dominates with 7 wins, and I don't have a problem with a single one of them. So yeah. If I were to open it up and to say, did it deserve to win Best Picture over all of these films? Does your answer change?
I still would have gone with It's a Wonderful Life. I think both personally, and I think how that film has held up, I think that would be my personal winner. But I do think that if I had my personal Best Picture 5 for that year, Best Years of Our Lives would still be in there. So I think that it's a worthy winner, and I'm not going to ever fault it. I'd put off watching it for a while because I was bitter that it beat It's a Wonderful Life. And now I'm like, no, this film's very good. The other ones, not so much.
Yeah. I think I would still just pick The Best Years of Our Lives. I think if I had a ballot in 1946, I would definitely probably pick it. But even now, I think it just still holds up, I would say, all of these years later. And provides a really interesting message that was not seen very much in films of that time. And It's a Wonderful Life has obviously had quite a shelf life, and it's shown every Christmas on TV, and that is all great for it, and it didn't even really need a Best Picture win to become that.
Yeah,
and
true.
So I'm kind of just like, hey, it all worked out pretty well. I'm
Fair,
good with everything. Anyway, thank you, Casey, for joining me for another interesting year. Always appreciate talking to you. So thank you.
Of course. Thank you. One of my favorite podcasts, so it's always a pleasure.
Aw. Well, tell the people where they can find more from you on the internet.
You can find my writing and podcasting over at Next Best Picture, and you can find me on Twitter at Casey Lee Clark.
Excellent. And you can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Jacobson. The show is at Oscar Runner Up. Go to any podcast platform and you'll probably find my show. Rate, review, subscribe. And if you want to hear more from us and you want to maybe hear that chat about Juno, that I think was very fun a few months ago, you can go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup is. So once again, thank you, Casey.
Thank you.
And I will bid you all adieu.